Okay, good morning and welcome to UKNOF26. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Keith Mitchell, UKNOF meeting chair. It's great to see such a huge turnout. We have, I think, 213 people registered by the last count, which is significantly more than we've ever had at a previous meeting. Could I just ask, those of you who are here to a UKNOF meeting for the first time, if you could put your hands up? Okay, cool. That's nearly half the people here. I'm going to ask the regulars and the usual suspects if you could make a special effort to reach out to the new attendees and bring them into the community. So we have a really busy schedule today. I just want to make a few announcements before we start. I would in particular like to thank all of our sponsors. You can see we have a pretty impressive list. Alternative and Sienna as gold sponsors, A10, ADVA, Cube, Data Center, NLIX. Imtech is silver sponsors, and then we have Infoblox, Amazon, who are contributing badges and other items, Go, who are doing the t-shirts, and Bogons and Portfast for the webcast as ever, and Hardware for sponsoring the social at the end of the event today. If you want to find the toilets, they are just out to the left there. In the event of a fire alarm, everyone needs to go out the front and then turn left, and then there's a green across the street, which is the assembly point. During lunchtime, there will be an opportunity to get your RIPE Atlas probe from Fergus, and Ivan Beveridge is also running a PGP signing session. As ever, everyone's probably got, we know exactly how many MAC addresses you all brought with you into the meeting, which means devices that can make noises. So please can you make sure that they are set to silent or vibrate and not going to make strange beeping noises during the proceedings. We're webcasting, it's a big room. When you've got any questions to ask at the end of a session, please can you raise your hand and wait until someone gives you a microphone before you speak. When you speak, please identify yourself and your affiliation. Also, we have a really tight schedule, so I'd appreciate if the speakers could please keep to the time slots assigned to them. If you have any questions as a speaker about your slides or how they're going to come up here, then Nat is the guy who is driving the slides. And we have plenty of radio mics, so again, if you're a speaker, please head to the back of the room in the break before your session to get wired up. And the final thing, the network. Do we have any update on whether we've fixed the issue with the network or not? Okay, we might have a recurrence of the network issue that we had last time for the connectivity, but we're working to fix that, so so a little bit of patience. And you will see that there are two SSIDs. There's a UKNOF Legacy, which is 2.4 gigahertz, and there's a UKNOF A, which is 5 gigahertz. Please try and use the A network if you can, which will scale better with all the people and bodies and devices that we have in here. Okay, so that's the announcements. The first presentation is from myself. The reason that this is first is not through any inflated sense of importance, but rather because this is about how we're running UKNOF. I do one of these every year or two, and it's here first, so you have a chance to digest. And if you've got any questions or concerns, then speak to myself or any of the board or PC members during the course of the day. So, I think I last gave one of these at UKNOF22 when we were back at BT. I'm going to just share a little bit of overview about where we are and also a little bit of history and also some of the changes that we've been making to make the meetings scale up better. So, we've run 24 successful meetings. Hopefully this will be a 25th. Anywhere between 40 and 200 attendees. The mailing list actually this past week had its 1,000th member. We also have about 600 people in our LinkedIn group. We have a program committee, we have a member advisory committee which provides oversight, we have a board which is responsible for executing things. We have a whole crowd of volunteers who help out every single time, and we're also in pretty good shape financially as well. Here's the charter. I'm not going to read it out, but this is the text that we cooked up 8 years ago. It's still valid. one of the interesting things is that it's quite often, when you talk about controversial topics, it's quite often common where the politics is whether the topic is operational or political, which is an interesting rat hole, but perhaps more of that later. I prefer to summarize it as distribution of clue. There's a lot of secret knowledge that keeps the internet hanging together, and the idea is that we bring that out into the open and we spread that clue to make everything work better. Most of our distribution of clue happens with the meetings that we have 3 times a year. We try and keep them current, we try and keep them relevant. Because we're not responsible for running any piece of UK internet infrastructure, it means that we can have a fairly wide remit and we can be fairly open about what we can talk about, which is kind of fun, but it's also useful that we can be a forum that other people, that other organizations don't necessarily. And it's also great that we can use that as a way of being more open and bringing the new guys in. And you know, there's a lot of international meetings out there, RIPE, NANOG, IETF, ICANN, and it's good to be able to bring some of the world-class speakers from these events, because we know that not everybody in the room in the UK industry can necessarily get to the events, but it's great when we can bring these speakers in and explain, share global best practice. The mailing list has actually some quite good discussions on it recently, but most of the LinkedIn and Facebook groups are mainly about announcements. So if you don't get into huge discussions, you might just want to subscribe to the social media, but the mailing list is also where we do announcements and some discussion. We also try not to be too home county centric. Meetings, we had the charter says at least 1 a year in London. We've had 2 consecutive ones in London, so we're going to Manchester next time, at least 1 per year outside of London. And we have an algorithm, but that quite often varies depending on clashes with other meetings and venue availability. We're always looking for good venues. We're always looking for sponsors. Here's the meeting registration. It's not your classic internet hockey stick. The blue ones are the London meetings and the red ones are the outside of London meetings. But you can certainly see the past year or two of steady growth in the London. And quite often the regional meetings, it just depends where we have them, what the attendance is. Facilities, it's a nice collaboration of volunteer and contributions. The center of it, but I'm trying to make this the organization increasingly less dependent on it, is on a server that I run, which is hosted by Jump. Bytemark hosts a bunch of virtual machines for us for our conference server, a wiki that we're bringing up and running, and also a CRM system. Mailing list, it's hosted by LunApp. Last few meetings, we've archived our videos on YouTube. And then there's a whole bunch of other bits and pieces that, you know, we have a conference bridge for PC calls, and various other bits and pieces help out as well. Funding model, we're a non-profit organization. Unlike a lot of meetings in this space, we really try hard not to charge meeting registration fees, and we've managed to do that just through sponsorship pretty much continuously, and we want to keep that up. We have been experimenting around the edges with paid-for registrations, and part of that is actually a social engineering effort to make people register early. So it's a penalty for late registration rather than us trying to make lots of money out of that. And also because some people have said that they would like to be able to donate to us. So that's working reasonably well. We need to make the process a little bit more seamless than it is. But we have a good operating cash buffer. We have enough money in the bank to run a couple of meetings if we had no sponsorship at all, which is something that we've been aiming for a while. So about 1.5 years ago, it was pretty clear that we needed to not just continue sailing along as we were, that we were in danger of a success disaster, and that we needed to manage things more proactively. We were getting a lot of generosity from various organizations who were donating meeting space to us, but the problem was that there was a kind of limit of around 100 people there, and we were having to turn people away from meetings, run wait lists. It was a lot of hassle and disappointment, and it wasn't clear that bigger venues were available. We were also really leaving money on the table. We had a whole bunch of sponsors who said, well, we want to sponsor the next meeting, and they came up and said, well, sorry, you can't sponsor the next meeting. You could maybe do the next one, but 3. Because we only have a couple of sponsors per meeting. And it was crazy that there was this money that was potentially available to us that we weren't using to enable bigger meetings for more space so that the people could come along. And it was also clear that things were getting more complicated. We were recruiting various bits and pieces of ways we did things. It's taking more resources, more volunteer time, more management cycles. So we decided that we needed to fix that. So we figured out a strategy. With hindsight, I think we could have done a rather better job of explaining what the strategy was before we implemented it, rather than just getting on with it. I know there's been some rumblings about why did they change that. So I apologize. Sometimes it's better to just get on and do things, but yeah, the communication could definitely have been improved. So this is my attempt to retrospectively fix that. I think the strategy has been highly successful. The fact that we're in this room with so many people and all kinds of nice things that we never used to have at meetings is great. But let's just try and explain what the hell it is we've been doing for the past year and a half. As I said, we wanted to remove the barriers so that anyone could attend a meeting and you didn't have to register early or sponsor or you could just come along. We don't want to waste the sponsorship opportunities. We wanted the organization to be more professional and scalable, and none of that is rocket science. It's something that techies are maybe not actually quite as good at as they would like to be, but there are plenty of other success stories, particularly with Nanog out there, about how you scale things up and make it more professional. And it's also about modernizing the way that we do things. There's a whole bunch of, at the risk of, I think this is my biggest number of buzzword bullet point in the entire slide, in the entire talk, but basically there's a whole bunch of really quite good tools out there, things like Indico and Etherpad, which are great for running a bunch of people who this is not their day job, but they've all got to work together and they're all geographically distributed, and less reliance on particular individuals who might be a single point of failure. And like I said, we also wanted to build up a reserve so that we could run meetings even if there wasn't any revenue. There's some hard realities that need to be dealt with in that if you go above a certain venue size, you have to pay for it. These venues are more expensive per head. Keeping attendance free means that we need to raise more sponsor money in order to cover these higher costs. So we set basically, here's the size of meeting that we think we want to achieve, here's the revenue that we need to achieve that. But achieving that revenue means that you need to be more dedicated and professional in raising the sponsorship money. You need to employ salespeople, is one way of stating it. But basically, we needed to find a way to pay for someone's time to actually bring the money in so that we didn't just pay for the meeting costs, but also paid for the time of the person that was raising the money. So running costs. We're now, from the old days where it was maybe 5K a meeting, it's now up to 25K a meeting. That works out about £100 per attendee per day in terms of venue, catering. There's also a whole bunch of miscellaneous costs, providing badges, various admin things, various things that underpin the connectivity, volunteer travel expenses, other expenses. And there's people's time as well. At the moment, Dinesh is, well, these are notional numbers. In practice, Dinesh is spending rather more time on that. But that's roughly the amount of time that it takes for non-volunteer effort. We decided that we would set a reimbursement rate and that we would target that. We're not actually paying that amount yet, but that's what we'd like to be able to achieve. And the idea was that we would raise most of this through sponsorship, and also a small amount of the late donation registration fees come in, maybe less than 10% of the cost of a meeting. But the point is that UKNOF is an open organisation. We have no secrets. There'll be detailed accounts about this at the AGM on Monday, and they're always available if you're interested and you want to know. So what's the new sponsor scheme? As I explained, there are various different levels. There's still the option to host a meeting as a sort of premium level. Platinum and Gold include sponsor presentations, lots at meetings, but we don't give these away lightly. There's a limit on the number of these. There's also a fee that we charge for organising, for us letting you organise a social for the event, and also the idea of supporter sponsorship for things like T-shirts and badges and various other literature. The latest version of the sponsor scheme, which is still a work in progress, is on the wiki. The wiki is also still a work in progress. We're hitting our targets. We're also planning a patron sponsor level where an organisation can potentially, or an individual can potentially sponsor UKNOF throughout a year. And a lot of credit to Dinesh. Dinesh has been working hard on this. in addition to what he's been doing in his events manager role. So, governance, always a good rat hole with internet organizations. The idea is that we want to put things on a formal footing, but we did some work in this a couple of years ago without overthinking it or creating structure with too much overhead. We're not running monopoly mission critical national internet infrastructure here. There are a whole bunch of organizations in the UK that do that really well. Although we have a lot of similar people in governance, in practice, if UKNOF fails tomorrow, the internet will not break. So we don't need to burn huge amounts of time and money on thinking about how do we run this stuff. The board is accountable to the community through a bunch of precisely these organizations that I just mentioned, the non-profit internet organizations that contribute in some way to UKNOF's operation, mostly UK organizations, but some international ones as well. Since we first floated this, we've implemented this via an advisory committee, and that's individual representatives appointed by these organizations. I'll say a little bit more about who they are in a minute. And basically, how do you get on the advisory committee? It's the existing members that do that. You'll see UKNOF Limited is a legal entity kicked around in various places. This was set up as a trade association in 2005. It's public company limited by guarantee, the common legal entity for these things. And it's basically hosted the UKNOF Secretariat from day one. It was proposed that UKNOF would have other functions. They never really got traction, but UKNOF has been running the bookkeeping, invoicing, bank accounts for UKNOF. And we formalised this a couple of years ago where effectively we decided the only thing that UKNOF was going to do was run UKNOF, and we did an effective reverse takeover of that. So the UKNOF legal entity is now basically dedicated to supporting UKNOF. So who are the board? If the board members could stand up, please. So we have Dinesh, Willie and Steve, who are not here. Mike, Nat, myself, and Nigel's not here either, but they will all be here for the AGM on Monday. So thank you, gentlemen. What does the board do? Fairly minimal. Appoint and remove the members of the various committees, sign off on finances. They can be natural persons only. We can't have board members that are organisations. But basically, it's the usual company director fiduciary duties. And 1/3 of the board must step down for reappointment each year, so it's not in perpetuity. We decided at our last board meeting that we needed to tweak the organisation a little bit. We needed to get some fresh blood into the programme committee. We needed more engagement with the advisory committee. We wanted to put a little bit more structure into the way that the various ad hoc volunteers help out and set up a meeting committee. We've also created a mailing list for the past few meetings for our regular volunteers. And also, we decided that we needed to reduce the overlapping individuals between the board and between the various different committees as well, and that's a work in progress. Advisory committee members, we don't expect money from these organisations. Some of them gave us money right at the start and help us bootstrap, but really it's just a small time demand and some in-kind help. We're also working, as I said, on the new sponsor, the patron sponsor category, which will allow commercial organisations to help on an ongoing rather than per event basis. Every so often the idea of, well, why don't we do something like NANOG and have individual membership for meeting attendees? You can buy an annual subscription and get your discounts. So it's certainly something that we're considering, but you need good management processes and micropayment processing in order to deal with that, and we're not quite there yet. But for what we're doing, we think that we've achieved accountability to the community through the advisory committee stakeholders. If you have questions or concerns, then talk to the board, talk to the AC representatives, talk to any of us. We'll be happy to talk. So who are the advisory committee? Organisations that have helped us through throughout UKNOF's history: the BBC, Brandon Butterworth, IX Leeds Andy Davidson, Links John Souter, Will Hargrave from LANAP, Janet Rob Evans, Wright Nigel Titley. You can think of a few other organisations that might be good candidates for the advisory committee. I've listed a few there, but at the moment they have not shown interest in that. But basically, what do they do? They'll probably meet a couple of times a year, including the AGM, and it's a case of having oversight and transparency into what the board does. I have a program committee, 14 volunteers. Their job is to make sure that there's interesting stuff at the meetings. And we're always looking for stuff, you know, even if you don't want to give a talk yourself, maybe you can think of a talk you've seen somewhere else that would be good for here, or maybe you can have suggestions for things that you would like to hear. We've now got into the practice of issuing call for abstract well in advance. For UKNOF27, the abstract submission starts today. And that's good. We've actually got to the point where we now have slightly too much material each time, and the program committee is actually making a decision about quality of material. But ideas and suggestions to the PC, but if you actually want a submission, then go to Indico. And so here's the PC members. I'd like to welcome some new PC members that we've appointed. Chris Russell, Debbie Casey, and Ray Bellis have all joined the PC recently for some new blood. And then there's the usual suspects as well, most of whom are here. PC members have a special tag on their badge. We've also been doing some, as I said, we wanted to cook up introduce this meeting committee. There's been a sort of mailing alias which has included various people. Dinesh in his role as events manager is going to get that a little bit more organized. There are a number of people who are not listed as PC or board members who are regular contributors. We very much appreciate their help in that. I think it's also important, particularly when we have sponsors and sponsor presentations, that we have good editorial separation so that the actual main program content is not influenced by sponsors, and the sponsors are getting the slot because they're paying for it, not because they're aspiring to necessarily the same level of quality. We don't want to compromise the quality of the actual technical content. So I think it's good to separate out the actual running of the meeting from the content of the meeting. And we also set up a volunteers list. That's been great for, you know, if you only get to 1 or 2 UKNOF meetings a year, but you maybe want to help out a little bit, taping down power cables or helping debug the connectivity or put the badges out, sign up to the volunteers list. It's a great way to start getting involved in the organization. And there's just a whole bunch of people who help out in various ways. I decided I wasn't going to assign, here's the person that's done what, because everybody just mucks in. This is by no means everybody. I apologize if you've helped out in the past and you're not being listed here, but these are some of the people, including some former PC members like John Lyons, who have helped us out in various ways in the past. And also PC members who are not listed there, and all of our speakers. Really just like to say thank you for all the support that you provide. So, what have we achieved lately? Well, we have 200 people in the room, and it looks like we're going to have a meeting, so I think that's a pretty important achievement. Indico Conference Management Platform, well, even when you fill a vacuum, it still sucks. It's not perfect, but it's just made running the meeting so much easier. We have a sponsor-supporter framework, which is formally documented now. There's an expenses policy. There's the volunteers list. Got some new blood into the program committee. That's an ongoing process. And there's a whole bunch of random content on the website, which we're in the process of migrating to the wiki so that it'll be easier to keep up to date. So what's next? We're going back to Manchester in January for UKNOF27. Former, excuse me. So that's a nice big new venue that we're going to. Reading, Hawaii are hosting us for 28 in April. We're still looking at various venues for 29. Belfast is a strong possibility. There are a number of other possibilities as well. And we're always looking for speakers and sponsors. So, you know, if you find any sponsors, then please refer them to Dinesh. Speakers, got ideas, submit them to the PC or submit them to the, here's a quick summary of the contact details. And that's it basically. I'd like, you know, if any questions or discussions, I'd like them to happen here. The AGM is just a formality. Any input that we get from here can be fed into the AGM. But we have, about 5 minutes for questions if anyone would like any clarification on what I've just talked about? Okay, can someone get Christian a microphone, please?
Thank you, Keith. That was actually very interesting to see how the progress is going. It's really great. You mentioned at one point you wanted some more organisations to perhaps volunteer and hadn't shown any interest. The local ISOC chapter is sort of more vibrant. I think Olivia will be coming in here later. I'm sure there'd be, if you wanted to post a message to the young members of ISOC, I'm sure that'd be totally open. I don't think there's any issue there.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. As I say, feel free to speak to me or any of the board or advisory committee members during the day. We'll be happy to take any input.